Woman of the Hour is a new Netflix crime thriller, and not only does it star Anna Kendrick, but it's her directorial debut, and it's based on a true story. The film stars, of course, Anna Kendrick, Daniel Savato, and Tony Hale. It's set in the 70s, and it follows the story of Cheryl Bradshaw, a single woman who is looking for a partner on a dating show, but little does she know of the violent man that is on the panel. This film hit Netflix today, and I enjoyed it, especially after my research. I can really understand why they put it together the way they did. I believe when you pick apart this film, it effectively captures the dynamics of power imbalances and the dangers they can pose when taken to the extreme. It weaves together various smaller examples with, of course, an extreme scenario. That is true. The crazy thing about this film is that these little scenarios, examples are the ones that are fiction. The big stuff is the facts. It illustrates both the subtle and overt threats that these imbalances create and shows how they exist in the everyday, but also in terrifying realities. And you'll understand what I mean by the end of this video. Of course, I'm going to get into spoilers. We're going to look at side-by-side comparisons for the truth versus fiction versus this movie. It's all about comparing the two today for entertainment purposes. I don't like talking about true crime unless it pertains to film. That's what we talk about on this channel. I'm going to explain the whole story and what examples they took. And of course, spoilers ahead for the film. We're going to break it all down. And also please appreciate that I am using certain terminology to fit YouTube guidelines. It's not my choice. It's what I have to do here. The movie, of course, is about Rodney Okala, and it starts off with him taking photos of a woman on a hillside. This was his MO, using photography skills to get someone alone and then attack them. The opening scene is really important, and it's not that graphic. I heard Anna Kendrick wanted to keep it so your imagination could run wild with the sounds, which is pretty disgusting, but very normal for this kind of film. But it's important because it demonstrates the way he would assert power. He has a very particular way he would do this. He would do stuff by force and then bring them back to life and then do it again. This is a sick torture method, and it also gave him control in this situation. That's what he was after. He was after the power and control and reliving the situation over and over. This was the real killer's MO. That and pantyhose and photography all line up. I thought this was a really good opening because it reflects the true killer's MO, but it also shows that this film is going to be about this strange power dynamic and really puts you not in the mind of the killer, but it's really shocking to see him perform in this kind of way. From here we go to Cheryl Bradshaw's character, which besides the tape, we don't know too much about. After all of this took place, she went and had a very private life. Cheryl is shown to be a struggling actress, and we don't know anything about this in real life. In the original tape, she's mentioned as a school teacher, but we don't really know much more about her. Even her IMDb only lists this as her credit, and it being used as archive footage in countless documentaries. But what we do know about this time is what Rodney was up to, because he has a grisly, detailed history of what we know. I'm going to take you through it, the short version, and I'm going to show you some examples of how they demonstrated this throughout the film. So Rodney was born in Mexico, and he moved to LA with his mother after his parents divorced. In 1961, he joins the army, and not even 2 years later, he flees. And by that, I mean he hitchhiked all the way home to his mother's house. After this, he had to turn himself in. He just left. He had to turn himself in, and he got psychologically evaluated, claiming he had had a breakdown. The military psych concluded that he had some kind of antisocial personality disorder, and he suggested that he should be hospitalized. But from what we know about him, he didn't do this, and instead he went to UCLA and he studied fine arts, and he studied photography, which became a big part of his personality. In 1968, his first known crime was committed. He lured an 8-year-old girl into his apartment. Luckily, there was a witness who saw it happening and called the police on him as it was happening. Unfortunately, it was too late. The police arrived on scene to find this young girl assaulted, and he fled the scene. They did help the young girl. She went into a coma, but she did recover. Here he fled to New York, and he enrolled in a film school under a different name. And one of his teachers was Rosemary's Baby director, that's how we know him and talk about him on this channel, Roman Polanski. And he mentions this in the movie, and it is a fact. It's very strange. And if you didn't know that and you watched the film, it might have seemed like a lie, but it is true. This kind of ties into the next part of the story, which is in 1971, we know about another victim. This is Cornelia Crilly, and she was only 23 years old when she was found dead in her apartment. This actually weaves into when he's telling this victim about the story of who taught him at film school, because at the time, the Brooklyn Assistant District Attorney thinks that he met Crilly as she was moving into a new apartment and accepted help for moving some furniture. So here we can see the stories blending together. And this next part is gonna blow your mind if you don't know the story, but still on the run, he gets a job working as a camp counselor. So he is around young teens all day, every day. But this becomes his downfall, or part of his downfall. He gets on the FBI most wanted list for his past crimes, and one of the kids from the camp sees the poster and recognizes him, calls the police, and he gets arrested. But he isn't in jail for long because of a plea deal, but also the psychologist evaluates him and says he no longer is a danger to women or children. And he's released within a couple of years. I've seen some people say that it was 17 months and some people say it's 34. I don't want to say either way because I don't want to get it wrong. But this is a good time to remind you, he hasn't even gone on the dating show yet. But here's where the movie starts because the timelines start to merge. He continues to use his photography as a way to meet and prey on women. He returns to LA after being in New York for this period and he kills 3 women. And now we've caught up to the time when he finally appears on the well-known dating show, The Dating Game. The movie suggests that Cheryl was asked to dress more flattering and dumb down her personality. But the original footage of the show displays a Cheryl nothing like Anna Kendrick's version. I adore Anna Kendrick, especially her attraction to dark thrillers. The Voices is a fantastic film. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. It is wild. Alice Darling, Fear Itself, Life After Beth. Although she's known for her romantic comedies or singing parts or Trolls, I do think she has a real good eye for film. So it made me so curious knowing this was her directorial debut and that she also chose to play the lead character who on tape is literally nothing like her. So I was surprised to find out that Anna got the gig of acting in the film first before getting the gig of directing it. She told Deadline, "I just love the script and of course I wanted to be in the movie." And I found that even though I did love the character, I was really invested in the script as a whole and was maybe kind of imposing my thoughts on scenes that I wasn't even in. In a way, one could argue wasn't necessarily my place. But I was technically a producer as well, so everyone indulged me for that time. She goes on to say, "I started to have this bubbling thought about pitching myself to direct the movie. I'd read all these drafts and was like, oh my god, I could go and cherry pick all of my favorite moments." From that realization, she said that she started to feel sick with the idea of anyone else directing it, and although it was scary for her, she took the leap. Kendrick and the writer Ian McDonald agreed that it was important, quote, "whenever we would fictionalize something, it would be in service to the emotional truth of the story." I personally believe that the film differs greatly from the truth to serve its own kind of narrative. I don't think it's bad. I think that exists within this greater story of this prolific killer, but it's a different story to what actually happened on the dating show. Woman of the Hour is a fictional extension of the events to discuss a greater issue, and I'm going to bring up some examples of this in the fiction section. But here it is, the central part of the film, the part we know is real. Side by side, you be the judge. Does it reflect reality? I do think visually it's a great recreation, changing it into its own thing, which it should. But the dialogue is totally different. The movie shows Cheryl's charm and ability to steal the show as someone determined to get stardom in a sexist industry. Although the real Cheryl is bubbly and very charismatic, the dialogue between her and the suitors is short, full of innuendos, and easy television. There is nothing personal about it. But there is some truth to some of the short interactions between Rodney and the fellow suitors, bachelors. We see this in the very aggressive chats they had off air. In real life, life, they made comments later to the media saying that he was rude and off-putting. But in the film, we see him call them out on stage when they are rolling. This never happened, of course, and it is a lot more aggressive. Also, he did not give photo evidence of his crimes to one of the contestants. That's crazy. They showed him being a lot less careful and more emotional, I feel like, in the film. Although we will get to it, but there is a part that he does break down in the film and in real life. This is the only time people have said that they saw all this emotion come out of him. This segment also extends Cheryl in every regard, making what is a silly dating show bit into her struggle to have a voice in a world where she feels silenced. The real question on the show is, what's your best time? And Rodney answers, the best time is at nighttime. And the famous last question is, I'm serving you dinner. What are you called and what do you look like? And Rodney answered, I'm a banana and I look real good. She asked, can you be a little bit more descriptive? And he answers, peel me. So it's very silly. It's very straightforward, kind of nonsense dribble, but also completely horrifying when you know who Rodney is. When they meet face to face, he doesn't touch her in the way that's shown, but instead embraces her, and it seems a little bit more polite and consensual, just kind of fun for the camera. I'm not saying she's not uncomfortable, she totally could be. But again, the micro and macro aggressions or power play are really shown and exacerbated in the film. Let's talk about the moments that were completely made up, and especially to highlight Cheryl as the central character within this story. Let's start with her friend zoning her neighbor, but really, this is just a healthy boundary. This guy is creepy, he's intrusive, and he will not take a hint. This is what the writer-director meant by fictionalizing something to service the emotional truth of the story. It helps to build the foundation, which is the situational imbalance of man and woman, and when it becomes power play. Cheryl feels bad for the guy and lets him down gently, people-pleasing and compromising a part of herself to make him feel at ease. The film starts this way and then shows it as a ripple effect. I don't want to say of her doing this because we can't put blame on her, that's crazy. But it eventually leads to the biggest difference between the truth and the fiction. Because everything after Cheryl and Rodney's interaction on the show, all of these scenes are fiction, complete fiction. They did not see each other after the taping, they did not go to a second location. None of that happened. An interview is quoted everywhere. I could not find the original source, but it's from 2012 from the Sydney Telegraph. She said she started to feel ill after meeting him and he was acting really creepy. And she told producers, there's weird vibes that are coming off of him. He's very strange. I am uncomfortable. Is that going to be a problem? They explained, no, you don't have to date him. And she never saw him again. I was worried they were going to do a whole back half of this film showing him hunting her down and all of that kind of stuff. I'm really glad they didn't go much further than that. It's a really interesting story to take one piece of 5-minute footage and of course the true backstory of Rodney and trying to turn it into one narrative with a woman that is a mystery to us being the protagonist. It's actually a very strange story because even though there's people who are at the center of it, there are so many moving characters. Speaking of, Laura is not real. Her being undermined by her partner and the security guard and her experience with Rodney and her friend Allison being a victim is a blatant double down of women not being believed or taken seriously. Again, that power play. She also brings an element of fear to the actual taping as no one in the studio is aware or suspicious of Rodney, and her being set up by the security guard really shows that no one is going to help Cheryl in time. She's got to save herself. Ed, of course, is another character that is exaggerated for the point of silencing Cheryl, wanting her to appear as nothing else but a pretty face for the show and becoming passive aggressive when she does not play the part. And also, he wore a bow tie, not a tie. There's the side by side. Now let's head back to Into the Truth as to what actually happened after the dating show. Rodney continued his killings using his photography again to lure women and get them alone. Monique Hoyt was one of his next victims, and she managed to survive the attack, waking up next to him with him crying. This is what they show at the end of the film, because Monique was the only known survivor of his attacks. And in the film, we see a similar recount of her testimony, which she told police and ultimately led to him getting locked up which we kind of see at the end of the film. The film is really clever in how they use this to top and tail the dating show. We think at the start this happened pre-dating show, and then we realize that this happened afterwards. And maybe if Laura was to be believed, or Cheryl got somehow involved, that this wouldn't have happened to the character. But it's also a false ending because it shows the cops coming and her seemingly being okay when that is not what happened in reality. She may have fled the scene, but there was still more victims. Although it's the perfect example for the film to end on. Once again, a woman pleading with a man in a horrifically polite tone for her safety and, in this regard, her life. Unfortunately, he made bail after this and he killed again, but his next horrific crime would be his last. He prowled the beaches looking for another victim, and he came across 12-year-old Robin Samso and her friend. He followed them home and waited for his opportunity. When Robin was on her own, she was leaving the house, and he kidnapped her. Because she disappeared after meeting him prior on the beach with her friend and witnesses were able to do up a sketch of what he looks like for questioning. They found Robin's remains, so obviously this case was blowing up, and then someone from one of his past cases called up and said, this looks like this guy Rodney. It fits him exactly. He was arrested and put behind bars, and this is perhaps the most haunting part of this whole story that they did not include in the film. The police monitored a conversation between him and his sister, and he told his sister to go and empty out his storage box. Of course, police intercepted, and what they found was horrific. This was his trophy box full of photos of his victims, hundreds of photos. It turns out these were connected to a lot of cold cases, some connected to missing person reports, and some we don't know. The exact number of victims he had is unknown, but it's estimated over 100. Some people say 130. I think they said that at the end of the film, but it's over 100. Luckily, he could not post bail, but it was a long process to get him sentenced. So long that DNA technology caught up with him, and he was ultimately sentenced to life in jail. He died behind bars in 2021 of natural causes, and he was 77. And that is Woman of the Hour, the true story, and the film. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. What do you think about these based on true story cases? I find it really fascinating to see how they take a story and what parts they take and leave. And then of course the underlining message, if any, that come out of that. Are we just talking about that person's life, or are we trying to tell a different story? And in this case, I do think that they were telling a different story. I'm feeling very drained after looking into this true case. It's very sad. I watch a lot of horrific and disturbing movies. You guys know this. I do videos about them all the time, but this really drained me looking into the true case and re-examining it. It's a lot. It's so sad. Thank you guys for spending your time with me, and I will talk to you all very soon. Don't forget to subscribe if you do like talking about cinema, if you like talking about horror movies, thrillers, and the disturbing. And don't forget, I did a video recently. I went and saw Smile 2. If you're looking for more horror-based content, here it is, and I'll talk to you all very soon. Stay safe and stay spooky. Bye, friends.